Hi, everyone. Thank you, as Terry said, thank you so much for joining us here today. And I'm Karen Wyatt. I'm the host of End of Life University podcast. I'm also a retired hospice physician and author. I write about death and dying and spirituality. And I used to be a speaker. I don't do as much speaking anymore these days, not at any live events, but I'm excited to be here with my friend Terry Daniel, and we've known each other for quite a long time. Terry's one of the very first people I ever interviewed for my podcast, and we've kind of been compadres ever since. We've done a lot of things together. And if you don't know Terry, she is an interspiritual hospice chaplain and end of life educator, certified in death, dying, and bereavement by the Association of Death Education and Counseling, and in family focused grief therapy by the Portland Institute. She conducts workshops and produces conferences and symposiums throughout the U.S. and teaches in the chaplaincy and thanatology programs at the Graduate Theological Union, Marian University, and the University of Maryland. That's three different campuses, which is amazing. She's the founder of the Afterlife Conference, the Conference on Death, Grief, and Belief, and the Ask Dr. Death podcast. And she's the author of 4 books on death and grief. And you can learn more at the website deathgriefandbelief.com. So, Terry, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend. And as you may notice, Brian Smith is not here. This is our bad news. I know we have a lot of Brian Smith fans, and that's the bad news. The good news is, let me first tell you why he's not here. He was supposed to be here. He was on vacation with his family, and he was supposed to fly home yesterday, which was Friday, and his flight got delayed by 24 hours. And he had to stay overnight in wherever he was. And he is, as we speak at this moment, literally boarding a plane. And so he can't be with us. And a lot of you guys know him. He's an incredible grief guide. He has a podcast. His website is grief2growth.com. That's numeral 2, grief to growth. But what he did, he's devastated that he couldn't be here. But what he did for us is, while he was there on vacation and realized he couldn't be here, he recorded a presentation for us. And it's about 10 minutes long. And we're going to start our day today with Brian's presentation, which he did specifically for this purpose. So that's how we're going to kick it off today, so that you can get your fix of the wonderful Brian Smith. So I think that's just how we're going to start. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go straight to Brian. And he made this presentation to anticipate a lot of the questions that he thought you might ask him if he was actually here. And the way we'll do this today, because it's kind of a workshop, is feel free to type questions into the chat box and we will ask and answer questions as we go along today. So this will be more of a conversation than just us talking at you. When we're done with Brian, we'll take some questions about what he said. Then I'm going to do a little bit of a speech, and then Karen and I will go back and forth and we'll continue with questions. Any questions about that before we go into Brian's video? Give it a couple seconds, see if anybody has anything to say.
Well, we're so lucky that Brian was able to record this important video for us, because he really did convey some messages that are very meaningful that we really need to hear today.
He was at a beach house someplace with crappy internet, and I think he went to a library or something to get a good signal to do this, because he's just that kind of person. We love Brian. All right, here we go. Let me share my screen. And we got Brian Smith. So here he is. Share sound, Brian. Here we go. Somebody let me know if you can see that. Karen?
I can't see it yet.
All right. Oh, sorry. There. Can you see it now? This one here?
I can see it now.
Okay. Let me hit play and then I'll make it bigger.
Hey there, I want to begin by
Can you hear?
apologizing for not being able
Yeah.
to be there
Okay.
in person with you today. I can't tell you how disappointed I am to miss it, but I'm on vacation, or I was on vacation, and my flight got bumped, and I'm actually going to be in the air as you guys are watching this. So I know that I'm there with you in spirit. We're going to talk today about grief, spirituality, and justice, and I'm going to speak to you about finding your voice. And what I try to do is anticipate some of your questions. I'm going to try to answer those in my presentation. You're in great hands with Terry and Karen, and I know Terry's going to have a lot to offer you, but I want to give you my input as well. So what we're going to do is explore how spirituality and activism intertwine. We'll talk about why speaking up matters, even if you think your voice is trembling. As spiritual people, a lot of times we can fall into a trap of bypassing our emotions and being fully human. And I think that's a mistake. We can do it ourselves, or others can do it to us. People will say, you're spiritual, so you shouldn't be involved in this. We should be detached. We should be not really engaged in what's going on in the world, because it doesn't really matter, right? If everything is okay and everything has always been okay and everything always will be okay, and this world is just an illusion or a dream, whatever analogy we might want to use, then that means that maybe we shouldn't be engaged in it because it doesn't really matter. I don't believe that's true at all. I think that we are here as spiritual beings to have physical human experiences, to feel the full range of emotions, from anger to grief to disappointment, also joy, etc. And if we don't experience all those emotions, we're not getting what we came here to do as spiritual beings. So Terry, when they were talking earlier, she was talking about detachment versus non-attachment. And the thing is, we don't want to be detached. We want to experience our emotions. We want to be engaged in the world. We want to care what's going on, but we don't want to let it bring us down. We don't want to let it burden us. And I've talked to people about, for example, watching the news. And I know many people can't watch the news or don't watch the news. And some spiritual people will say, well, I don't watch it because it brings down my vibration. For me personally, I do watch the news, but I balance that out. I watch the news and it might bring me down some, but then I'll balance it out by going and meditating or listening to some uplifting music. So again, trying to feel that full range of human emotions. So I think that we need to do that. At least it's my opinion. So we talked about non-attachment versus detachment. I think Terry will probably talk more about that. But I am not a believer in passive acceptance just because I'm a spiritual person. Jesus said, and even though I'm not religious anymore, still a follower of Jesus. Jesus said to be in the world, but not of it. T.S. Eliot said in one of his poems, "Teach us to care and not to care." And that line really resonated with me. In fact, I actually wrote a little song about it. But we want to care, but not too much. We want to be able to care, but also put that down. We want to be able to bring love and peace to a situation. For example, what's going on in the Middle East right now, in a couple of places in the Middle East. I don't want to turn away from it. I don't want to just look at it with despair and bring that negative energy to it. I want to bring love and peace to it and try to send, good vibes to the people that are going through that. Again, when I think about the example of Jesus, a lot of people are trying to turn Jesus into this milquetoast, passive character who just said we should love everybody, which he did. He said those things as well. But he was also deemed dangerous enough to be murdered by the state and by religious leaders. And it's interesting to me that how those two conspired. The religious leaders of the day, who didn't have the authority to kill Jesus on their own, the Jewish leaders, went to the Romans and said, this guy is dangerous. Now, if Jesus wasn't speaking out, if they didn't feel like Jesus was attacking him, then they wouldn't have murdered him. So I look at people like Jesus, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Gandhi. Those are the leaders that I look to, people who are the spiritual leaders, but who also spoke up loud enough that they were actually killed. They risked everything for justice. Those are the models that I follow. Now, on a personal level, my grandfather was a minister, and both of his parents were ministers. Those are the people that I follow as well. Now, my daughter, and Thomas Jefferson, by the way, is also my fifth generation grandfather, which is a whole mixed bag of things. But he's another example that I use. My daughter, who's passed away, Shayna, was 15 when she passed away 10 years ago, actually, as of a couple of days from now. Shayna, actually, when she was in eighth grade, I guess it had to be eighth or ninth grade, because that was as far as she made it in school before she passed. But she went to my wife and she said, I want you to make a sweatshirt for me, and just one word across it, feminist, in all caps. And Shayna wore that to school, and one of her teachers, said, I love that shirt, where'd you get it? And Shayna said, well, my mother made it. And Shayna had her mother make one for her. That's, and Shayna is my legacy. She is, as my cousin said to me one time, she's an ancestor now because she's on the other side. So I want to make those people proud. Also, as someone who is a Black person who was born in the 60s, I have I owe a lot to people who spoke up before me, for people who fought for civil rights to get me to where I am now. And I feel like I not only have the right to speak up, but I have the responsibility to speak up. You may notice I'm wearing a Black History t-shirt today. I happen to be recording this on Juneteenth. And it's kind of funny because I was like, I probably shouldn't put that shirt on for this presentation because it's kind of controversial and it might make people feel uncomfortable. And I realized this is what I'm here to talk about, right? I'm here to talk about speaking up. So that's why I have this shirt on today. People try to divide politics versus spirituality and say that, our spirituality is personal, our morality is personal. But we do have a government. We live in a society where we live in a society. And in our societies, we have governments. And our governments, in my belief, are a way of collectively expressing our morals. And if we don't participate in that, then we're allowing other people to express their morals and impinging that on us and on the people that need protection. So I believe that we as spiritual people, we're here to care for others by nature, right? We're spiritual leaders. And we are moral beings. And I believe that political engagement is an extension of our spiritual values. It's not one or the other. And I really can't find a divide. People say you should keep politics out of your spirituality or spirituality out of your politics. I can't really make that distinction. And I believe that we have responsibility to speak up for the marginalized, the people, the vulnerable, those without power. So I've seen people who have the privilege of not having to speak up because things aren't impacting them personally say, well, it's not my responsibility, or they'll say it's not my right or whatever. I believe I have the right, I have the responsibility to speak up for people who are not spoken up for. And I'm not a partisan person. I avoided parties for a very, very long time until one party in particular in our American system of government is more closely aligned with my views, I'll say, not completely aligned, of course, but I'm for whoever is for the most justice, for autonomy, for bodily rights, for the most people being able to vote, for taking care, again, of the poor, for people to be able to express their gender the way they choose to, for diversity, equity, and inclusion, even though I know that's a dirty word now, or dirty words to some people. I am for all those things. I'm for being woke. Now, there's a question when we're in this community and we are leaders and we're dependent on others for our income, say, well, what's this going to cost you? And people have asked me, well, have you lost any business because of what you do? To be really frank with you, I'm 64 years old. I'm near retirement anyway. So I don't really depend on daily income to get by, but I do need to make money, and I like to make money for what I do. Have I lost business? I'm sure that I have, but I also feel like, business-wise, just looking at it from a pure business point of view, I think people are drawn to authenticity, and I know that some people are drawn to the fact that I do speak out, that I do talk about my values. And I want you to think about this. How much is your silence worth? How much would someone have to pay you if someone's going to write you a check to be silent, to Be silent because if you speak out, they're not gonna write you this check. So that's basically what you're doing. That's the calculation you're making if you choose not to speak out. If you think this is going to cost me X amount of business, so basically you're being paid for your silence. Another thing people will talk about is, does my voice really matter? I'm just one person. I don't have a big following. Yes, absolutely, your voice matters. You can influence one other person. That person can influence another person. And it's by that sitting out, for example, of elections, people who don't vote, but because they say their vote doesn't matter, collectively our votes matter. Collectively speaking up absolutely matters. So never let it be an excuse to say that your voice doesn't matter. This is where I'm going to kind of close out. I just want to kind of summarize and say that I believe that true love demands action. I believe that morality, I believe that faith demands action. There's a kind of a back and forth in the Bible about which is more important, faith or works. But as the Bible says, faith without works is dead. So I'm not one to sit and just meditate to try to change the world. I believe I need to take action. And my way of taking action is by using my voice. So I'm, again, so sorry I couldn't be there with you today. I hope this helped. I hope I answered some of the questions that you have. Enjoy the rest of the time with Terry and Karen, and I'll catch you later.
Hi, everybody. I'm interrupting the recording here to let you know that we had a little bit of a technical glitch at this point, and I want to let you know that from this point forward, we are going to be audio only. Those of you who got the email who were in the live broadcast already know this, but we had a little bit of a recording problem. So going forward, it's just going to be audio with no video. And that's okay because after Brian Smith's presentation, there was nothing visual to look at anyway. It was just a bunch of talking heads on Zoom. So you're not missing anything. So just listen in and enjoy the content. And thank you again for joining us. Thank you. Wow, that's going to be a hard act to follow.
Yeah, that was really great.
Amazing. Thank you, Brian. Let's see if we have any comments in the chat. True love demands action. Yes, this. Okay. Well, you guys are all going to get a copy of the recording of this whole thing. So anything you missed, you will see. And I particularly asked Brian to talk about Jesus. This is not a Christian presentation, obviously. We do have a Catholic priest in the audience. I won't mention any names, but this is definitely ecumenical and religiously inclusive. But I think I'm going to start by mentioning all the very well-known spiritual leaders who are known for being activists. Jesus is, of course, the most famous one that comes to mind, but of course, the Dalai Lama does not just sit in a temple and meditate all day. He comes out and speaks out for causes all the time. Certainly, Martin Luther King did, Malcolm X, as Brian mentioned, Gandhi, Thich Nhat Hanh, Desmond Tutu, Al Sharpton. These are just a few that pop into my mind. And one of the things I'm going to ask you guys to do as we go through this presentation today is to just take some notes as you're thinking about who your favorite spiritual teachers are, the people that you follow in your work, whatever your work is. If you're a death doula, hospice worker, if you are a medium, and these are the kinds of spiritual works we're talking about here. If you follow, near-death experience, shamanism, out-of-body journeying, meditation, whatever your thing is that you do in spiritual work, whose books do you read? Who are your teachers? Who do you follow on Facebook? What speakers do you listen to at conferences or podcasts? Who are your teachers? Just think about this as we're talking and write them down. And think about, do they speak out publicly about the human rights issues that we're going to be talking about in a minute? And just note if they do or if they don't. And I would be curious to know who they are. And and send them to me in an email, because I want to reach out to them and invite them to speak at my conference that's coming up next month and engage with me and build this new community up with them. Because my guess is that they are interested in, yes, Upaya Zen Center, their director of chaplaincy is speaking at my conference next month. Mary Montgomery, thank you for mentioning them. You're right on target. We're going to talk about that lately. Yes, Upaya is right there. And Matthew Fox, excellent example. Love Matthew Fox. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I don't have a chance to take, one of you guys please take notes and write this all down and email it to me. Oh my God, Matthew Fox is such a good example. So yes, yes, yes. And he is a priest. Andrew Harvey is the person from whom I learned the term sacred activism. I always credit him for this. I did not coin that frame. Richard Rohr, another favorite of mine. Pema Chodron. Yes. Oh my God. I do not have the bandwidth right now to write these all down. Somebody please write this all down for me and keep a list, because I need this list as I continue to build this work. And speaking of that, one of the things I wanted to say to you guys is, as you know, I work with grief. All of us work with grief, or most of us do. And there is actually a theory and a practice in the grief field right now called political grief. And if you look in the academic research libraries, as I frequently do, believe it or not, there is research on something called political grief. I actually pulled up a couple articles the other day for the classes that I teach, and I was delighted to find out that there's actually a thing called political grief. I didn't know that. And so I am pointing myself in the direction of working in the field of political grief, because that is an upcoming thing. And all these names here that you're mentioning, we want to start pulling them into this area of work, because this is going to become very, very important in future years. So I want to just, before I go on to any of this, I want to just lay down a couple of ground rules about this conversation. This is a nonpartisan discussion. We are not going to take any political sides here. We are not going to name any names of who we don't like, or what sides we're on politically. This is a spiritual discussion. And what this means, I'm going to make a couple assumptions here. I'm going to assume that this audience, by the way, we have 460 people who registered for this event. There are only 50 who are here live. That's about par for the course with live, but 460 registered, which means they're all going to be getting the recording and listening to this. So this is obviously an important topic. Okay. The assumption is that we are all interested in, for lack of a better term, what we're going to call spiritual work. Spiritual work means that we do work in, for lack of a better term, the non-physical realms, the higher dimensions, some sort of form of healing. Now, this could be psychological work with the psyche, but really we're talking about work with the soul and the spirit. That could be Reiki healing. That could be meditation teacher. That could be any kind of spiritual teaching. That could be psychic mediumship work. That could be working with near-death experience, guided meditation, whatever you guys do, you can put in the chat box. What do you do in this realm? Maybe you don't do this work as a teacher. Maybe you just do this work personally yourself. Maybe you're just a spiritual person on a spiritual path. Maybe you're a priest or a nun or a rabbi or a monk of some sort, all of that. And there is this kind of ethos in that world that says, I live up here in the higher realms. I don't dirty myself with the material world. You know, as Brian said, it dirties my vibration. It lowers my vibration. I'm just up here in the clouds, And that other stuff is not for me. I can't do anything about it. I'm going to just be here and radiate love and good vibes and positivity. And I'm going to just heal people one heart at a time. And that's where I'm going to be. And that's all I have to do. And I get that. I used to think that way too. But we're in a situation in America now where the basic tenets of human decency and love for human beings, the kind of love that Jesus talks about, the kind of love that Gandhi talks about, all that kind of love, the kind of love that we have experienced when we are in these higher realms, the kind of love that we hear about when we're having an out of body experience or a near death experience, the white light kind of love that we work with, that kind of love is being violated. And I'll give you examples of this right now. And so when that is happening, that is where we are called upon as emissaries of this love to speak out and do something. Karen, I'm talking way too much. Do you want to say something?
No, that's such a beautiful conversation. And I love that Brian set us off by thinking about the idea that love is not milk toast passive. Love is actually fierce. If you think about it, love is just this powerful creative force that brought all of this into existence. And we need to harness that energy when we face what's happening in the world right now. And I view it in a sense too that collectively humanity is going through a dark night of the soul where the worst of our shadows are coming to the surface. And it is terrifying to most of us to see it, to have to witness it, to have to see it displayed in front of us. But this is the time we need the most courage we could ever have, and we need that fearless, fierce love in order to go through it and to go through it together.
Yes. Okay. And fearless, fierce love can express itself on earth, in heaven as on earth, or on earth as it is in heaven, is the expression. And so the kinds of things that we're looking at, and I'm going to just speak about America right now because that's where almost all of us are here, is, what's going on in the world. And again, we're going to take the view from space, 30,000 miles out in space, coming from this spiritual heart that we have, looking at actual events that are going on in America that we care about. We don't take sides. We're not Republicans or Democrats on whatever side of the aisle. It doesn't matter, because from this 30,000 mile view from space, there are no sides. And so from this spiritual heart, what we are looking at, that from spiritual love should never be done to a living soul, to another human being, to an animal, to a plant, to the planet, and just, whatever you see on the news. I don't know if you watch the news or how much I'm going to just list some of the things that are going on that I'm thinking about. Putting innocent people into detainment without due process, arresting elected officials who try to intervene in the name of protecting democracy, for doing their jobs without, they're not breaking any laws, cutting programs for research, food aid, assisting the poor and the sick, assisting veterans, assisting in disasters, threatening education at all levels, from elementary to higher education, forcing a dominant theology into public schools, manhandling public officials who try to speak out in the way that we're talking about speaking out, rounding up innocent people who've committed no crimes in workplaces and public places, in safe places like churches and schools, hospitals, seizing people's phones at airports and demanding that they unlock their phone and look at them to see if they've spoken out against the government. Again, not taking any sides here. These are just violations against human dignity that are going on in America right now. And if we see ourselves as spiritual people, meaning people who value love, inclusion, inner wisdom, soul depth, however you want to define it, and we have that ethos of being above the fray, then if we can look at all this from the higher view, left, right, center, none of that matters. From that view alone, we would not support doing these things. We would not support depriving hungry people of food, depriving people of education, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's really all I'm going to say about that. So, comments, anybody? I could go on and on. All right. I mean, is this resonating? I just want to hear some comments in the chat. Is this making sense to people? Okay. Yeah. Hang this will work. Thank you, Kathleen. All right. Thank you. Absolutely, Riz. Thank you. Okay, good. So the issue is, Brian was talking about people asking him, have you lost any business? And this is a really interesting question. So many of you know me, from the Afterlife conference, which I started in 2009, which is like 16 years ago or something. And I started out being very involved in after-death communication, talking to the other side, out-of-body stuff, shamanic stuff. I'm still into that. But my work changed over time because I started going to school and getting into the academic side during those years. And I kind of moved away from spending a lot of time in the ether to getting more involved in the academic world. And my newsletter and my conferences and my focus kind of moved away from the woo-woo world into the academic world. And I shifted my focus a little and I lost some followers. People started unsubscribing to my newsletter because my content changed a little bit. I expected that. Well, now my content is also beginning to change. I still have plenty of stuff about near-death experience and mediumship and all that. I didn't leave that behind, but now I'm starting to talk about sacred activism, and I'm getting a lot of unsubscribes. Again, as Brian is talking about, I'm losing business, so to speak. But that's okay because I'm changing and evolving. And that's also part of this ethos that I'm talking about. This is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to expand. We're supposed to learn. I could not imagine myself still talking and teaching about the same things that I talked about 16 years ago. So maybe this is where we're heading. And back then, when I was at the height of the Afterlife conference, I remember having a conversation with the legendary Raymond Moody. Many of you know who he is, who coined the term near-death experience with his book Life After Life that came out in the 70s, who did the breakthrough research on near-death experience. I said to him, now that we know what we know about near-death experience, now that we have mountains of research on this, we have probably 10,000 accounts from people who have given their stories of being on the operating table and floating up to the ceiling, and all of that. Literally 10,000 recorded accounts from people all over the world, tons of studies. Now that we have all this, what are we going to do with it? And that was kind of our dilemma. Like, we can't just keep having people come to conferences and tell their stories over and over again. That's good, but we got to move to the next step. What's the next step? What do we do with that? And the next step turned out to be, at least for me, starting to explore religious beliefs that were underneath all this. Like, how did people's inherited religious beliefs influence the experience they were having in their near-death experience? And then people like Gregory Shushin, who's a scholar who's written books on this, started to study that. And as we started studying that and comparing this across the world, long story short, people's religious beliefs began to change. And as we are seeing a shift in religiosity because of what we're beginning to learn about what those other dimensions look like. And we're beginning to see people's church attendance dropping and belief systems about heaven and hell are changing because we have this information like, oh, you know what? People with near death experiences, they're finding out that people don't burn in hell forever. And so now that we are learning that the universe is a friendly place that doesn't punish us for being gay or something, then maybe the universe is a friendly place that wants us to carry that friendliness back to earth. There. That is the point. So that is why when we see innocent people sitting, doing their job in a factory or standing in front of Home Depot waiting to get hired for a day work in construction, these are not criminals. These are people who have not broken any laws, getting rounded up by scary looking ICE agents. We have to speak out and we have to do something as spiritual people. And over the years, since the 60s, when I used to be a young activist, there were priests in the streets, in the churches, stepping forward and helping out with the homeless, with the immigrants, with abused women, with everybody who needed help. And all those people need our help more than ever now. God, I feel like I'm on a soapbox. Sorry. Go ahead, Karen.
No, I think it's so wonderful what you're pointing out, this challenging conversation that we need to have with one another. And we honestly we're not even sure how to do it because we haven't been at this level of suffering that's right in front of our eyes that we can literally see and hear about every day. And we are being challenged to figure out how to talk about it and what we can do about it. And I liked what Brian was saying about the fact that if we're spiritual beings who are having a physical experience, well, we didn't come to Earth so that we could stay in the spiritual realm. We came to Earth to experience Earth, and this is a planet of suffering. Humanity is full of flaws and full of mistakes and full of even hatred and the possibility of being atrocious to one another. And we came here to experience that. We came here to learn how to live with that and how to witness it and how to bring love into this environment. So we really are being asked to embrace all of it and figure out, how do I be in my higher self? How do I bring all these lessons I've learned onto this planet and live here in this space and do whatever I can to try to shine the light and to try to give this love to other people who need it.
Kathy has her hand raised. Go ahead, Kathy.
Yes, Karen, on that note, I'm wondering, sitting here in my community, how do we even just get a conversation started without it turning into, political sides or something? How can we start the conversation from a place of love and then say, what can we do about it? Because I'm sitting here wondering the same thing. How do we get started?
I wanted to share something that this was from a friend of mine. We're in a dream group together. She lives in Washington, D.C. Something that started in her community back in March was they created a community soup pot, basically. This enormous pot, literally, of soup that got made every day. People donated things to be in the soup. They put a call out, bring things for our soup, and people donated vegetables from their garden or spice mixes that were part of their culture. And every day the soup would get made from whatever donations had come in. Then the soup was brought to this little plaza or square in the community, and everyone sat down and ate the soup together and shared it. Different people came every day, different people donated things, but the soup got made every day. There were a group of people who were committed to making the soup in the morning, bringing it out to the square and serving it. And every day the soup was eaten. There were enough people who came and everyone enjoyed the soup. I love the idea of this kind of action that has love behind it, but we don't have to talk about politics, and we don't even have to directly address issues that are going to be triggering for everyone. We're coming together in a community and trying to heal the fabric that used to hold us all together, but has been so stressed and frayed, and using food to do it because, and everyone was welcome. They invited people who were maybe didn't have enough food in their homes. Come every day, we'll have soup here. You can join us and have soup. And so I don't know. I think those kind of actions are so beautiful that bring us together, and maybe conversations get started in the groups of people that are there. But at the very least, we're we're acting with dignity and with compassion for one another, and we're coming together like a communion almost, to enjoy a meal together. I think we need more creativity in ways like that. We need to think of actions we can do that will bring us together without triggering all the divisions that have come up around us. So that's just one idea. I don't know how hard it was to organize that, and if that's even possible for anyone else to do. But I loved sharing her story and what they did. I thought it was so beautiful.
There are a lot of hands-on things you can do directly related to specific events. Like when that New York comptroller guy was arrested the other day, I never heard of anybody doing what he was doing. He was volunteering as an escort at people's immigration hearings. He was going to the immigration office and just being there so that when somebody went to an immigration hearing, he would literally walk outside with them and make sure they got into their car safely and could drive home without getting scooped up by ICE. And I thought, what a cool idea. Like anybody could do that. Just be like, we used to have clinic escorts at abortion clinics. Remember that? But you don't even have to do that. You don't have to actually go out into the community and attach yourself to an issue, because even that is a sort of taking sides thing. What I'm more thinking about is to identify yourself as being sympathetic to humanity in your public role. So if you have a platform, if you have a podcast or a newsletter or any kind of public presence, if you have a website, like let's say you are a Reiki healer or a massage therapist or something, it's simple as putting something on your website that says, you know, I support human rights. You don't have to say any particular issue. You don't have to say same-sex marriage or immigration. You can stay away from issues and just say that you're on the side of dignity, respect. You could say, I support the Constitution. I support, what do you call it? Due process, the basic ideas that everyone agrees with, that don't take sides. Even the most conservative political people agree that there should be due process. Even the most conservative political people believe in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Nobody's going to say, no, I don't agree with that. So those are things that you can speak out for that do not put you on one side or the other or make you left or right or political. And yeah, go ahead, Karen. You looking at
I was just going to say, I was wondering what you think about this. I feel like we need more communal grief rituals, that there's such a tremendous amount of grief in our society. I don't think we fully processed grief after COVID. And I think in some ways it's like this bubbling cauldron that maybe we need communal collective ways of grieving together that also are not, that don't divide us, but something we come together again to establish um, a grief practice, or a grief space, even a bulletin board where people post what they're grieving about. And I don't know, I know you have great ideas for grief rituals, but what are your thoughts about that, Terry?
I've been looking at all these protests, and I think those are grief rituals.
Yeah, yeah, that makes
And maybe that would be something, those of us who have training in grief, is, that's the other thing, comment publicly, speak out. Like if you're on Facebook or someplace or Substack, wherever you see posts and people are talking about protests, put your 2 cents in there and say, hey, I'm a grief counselor and I interpret this protest as a grief ritual. Use your professional credentials to give your opinion that, what, when I see 20,000 people marching because they see democracy dying, what I see is grief. And so again, you guys are, this group of people, we've got some amazing professional credentials in front of us here. You have knowledge and wisdom and power to use your credentials to speak publicly. If you don't have a blog, if you don't have a Substack, go start one. But here's the thing that happens, and this is what Brian was talking about, like, are you going to lose business or lose your job? Like, I'm not saying, and please definitely don't do this. I'm a hospice chaplain and a hospice grief counselor. I would never have a conversation like this with any of my hospice clients. That's off limits. I'm not saying to do that. What I might have is a bumper sticker on my car. And when I'm in the parking lot of my hospice office, my coworkers are going to see it. And, I happen to work for a very cool hospice that hands out, rainbow pins that say, you are safe with us, for our LGBTQ clients to see that we have a rainbow pin on our badge, so that when we walk into clients that are LGBTQ, they can see that we're not going to judge them. But in your workplace, in your public facing role, wear your inclusive flag, whatever that looks like, to let them know that you are on the side of justice and freedom and inclusion, whatever words you want to use, but you don't, do not evangelize to your clients. That's definitely a no-no, unless they bring it up first. And that can happen because many of us sit with clients and have very deep conversations, and they might have a conversation with you about how, whatever it is. But if they're, we advise against it. I'm sure there are many people in this room that are chaplains, and we don't engage in those kinds of conversations. That's not what we're there to do.
Did you see Miriam's question?
No.
When your workplace tries to take that away, such as VA employees?
I'm curious to hear, what does the VA do, Miriam? Tell us. Open your mic and tell us about it.
Yeah, well, I hear you speaking to a desire to show up with your beliefs without needing to fight for them, maybe needing to make trouble. And as a VA employee, we are no longer permitted to publicly name that transgender people exist. We, and the VA I work in, we cannot have any displays of rainbow. No VA can have displays of rainbow flags. No federal buildings can have displays of rainbow flags. This is as of this administration, and my VA has extended that to no rainbows. So what would you do should you be at your same workplace and where each of your colleagues stand on the issue of LGBTQ equality, and your workplace says, but sorry, you can't wear that rainbow anymore? What then?
Your workplace, even if you have a very liberal workplace, unfortunately, they are under the thumb of the federal government. Like, that's not your HR's choice. right? The federal government is enforcing that on them. Isn't that true?
It's a mix of the federal government and like local attempts to figure out how to negotiate the federal government, decide what they want to fight for and what they think isn't worth fighting for and what they want to protect. And also for some, it's an opportunity to roll back on issues that they would like to roll back on.
Well,
So
it's
a
awful.
combination.
Yeah, and I know that in a lot of federal workplaces, they even have policies that you are asked to report colleagues who make anti-Christian statements, who express anti-Christian sentiments. Have you heard this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, that is a federal policy. So I'm curious about
I would go out of my mind if I had to work in a place like that. And if it was me, I would leave. I mean, just I wouldn't be.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
the reality for a lot of us. A lot
Yeah.
of us who work in red states.
Yeah.
It's one thing to say you can put something on your website or you can have a tag on your car, but it's another to say, how do you show up? What does your advocacy look like? And I think I'm questioning your, I heard you say, you don't pick a side, and I think I'm struggling with to hear you say you don't pick a side, because in my experience, like, I've had to pick a side. Because I can't just show up with a flag and say, oh, I'm not going to talk about it.
The only reason I'm saying you don't pick a side is because I don't want to offend anyone in this group who might be on a side that doesn't agree with me. So I'm trying to be diplomatic about sides, but of course you have to pick a side when it comes to something like this. I mean, because this is, with this is wrong. I mean, when something is so blatantly oppressive like this, of course you have to pick a side. And I am going to just come out and say that, and this is exactly, and when I say don't pick a side, it's not Republican or Democrat, it's the side of humanity. And this is anti-human, what you're talking about. So in that sense, of course, there are sides. And what can you do? There's a lot of things you can do. You could organize an uprising in your workplace, but you'd have to be willing to lose your job. You can organize all the people who are on your side to wear a rainbow pin and a rainbow flag and have a protest, and then everybody gets fired. I mean, that's how we did it in the 60s. That's the risk you have to take, just like Brian was saying. And this is why we protest. This is why we have a No Kings protest. This is exactly the stuff that we're fighting and that we're grieving. It is, I think, unconstitutional for a workplace to tell you what you can wear and what you can think and what you can say. I mean, this thing about anti-Christian bias and report people. If somebody sat in your workplace and said, I think the doctrine of hell and damnation is really stupid, and somebody has to go tell on you for saying that, and you can get in trouble. This is wrong. I claim sides on that one. So yes, and maybe this is how we define it. When it's anti-human, when it's anti-free thought, there's always a side, of course. Miriam, I wish I could tell you what to do. I have no idea.
Oh, I don't expect you to have the answer. I just appreciate hearing you speak to it. So yeah. Thank you.
And maybe that's it. Maybe that's how we define it. Here's the side. Support human dignity. Don't support human dignity. Those are the sides. And it's not red and blue. There are no sides. Yeah, see no stranger. And there's another thing. We did another podcast like this a few weeks ago. And, there's this very high metaphysical concept called there's only one of us here. There are no others. And when we start othering, that's not God. That's not oneness. That's not spiritual. Okay, we're having, let's see.
I have a question here that, but aren't protests inherently political? And so how can you be apolitical?
Depends what you're protesting. I mean, the protests that are going on now have 50 different issues in them. Everybody has a sign about something different. You know, when I went to a protest the other day, my sign said free Harvard. That was my issue because I'm a college professor. I'm really pissed off about what's going on with Harvard. Everybody has a sign about something different. So when it's, 50 different issues, really what is the protest about? It's about all these basic human rights being taken away. So in that sense, we're on the side of human dignity. And we can argue the nuances of every single issue, and that's when it comes down to sides. So I'll give you an example. I was having dinner the other day with a friend of mine who's very conservative, and she's still my friend, and we love each other, but she's very conservative, and she gets her ideas, I guess, from Fox News because her facts are pretty skewed. And somehow we got on the subject of George Floyd. And she said, well, he wasn't really murdered. I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, he was high on fentanyl, and that's why he died. He died from fentanyl overdose. If he hadn't been on drugs, he would have been able to breathe and he wouldn't have died. And I said, okay. And this is me being diplomatic. I'm no doctor, but I'm pretty sure when you cut off the air to somebody's windpipe for 9 minutes, they're going to die, even if they're the most healthy, strong person in the world. Karen, you're a doctor. What do you say?
Yes, you're right. And we have video of it.
And we know that happened, right?
Video recorded. We know that.
And she absolutely believed this, that the reason he died was because of the drugs in his system. That's what made him die. And even though we know that somebody did this for 9 minutes, she doesn't believe that. Now, why am I telling you this? I completely forgot. Why?
Well, it kind of shows the extent of misinformation that is prevalent everywhere. And that actually some of the people we care about whose beliefs differ from ours, it's because they have received different information than we have. And they are simply acting on something they've been told that they didn't know how to investigate or how to find validation for. And they may be innocently believing it and innocently basing their beliefs on something they've been told. So that's the other end of it all, is the amount of misinformation. It's not like we're all operating with the same basic set of facts and information.
Oh, and I know what it is. It's also an example of human dignity. There's no sides on this. You don't do that to a human being. That's the point. And so that's how you can neutralize this political. I didn't argue with her. It was like, oh, whatever, let's have another glass of wine, because I knew I was never going to get anywhere with her. But the side that you take in this fight is the side that you don't do that to a human being. I don't care who they are or what they did. The only time that would ever be okay is maybe if I caught somebody in the act of molesting my child, then I would go and put my foot on their throat for 9 minutes and make them die a horrible death. Maybe that would be justified, but nothing less than that. You don't do that to a human being or an animal or anybody. That's the side that we're on. We're the side of, remember, let's go back to, we are spiritual people. We're on the side of spiritual love. You just don't treat people that way. You don't take an innocent, hardworking human being out in a field picking strawberries and chase them down and round them up and put them in a detention camp just because they're Latino, which is happening in the fields in California right now. And you may believe anything you want about immigration and who's legal and who's not and what they should do. You just don't do that. It's not how you treat people. Those are the sides. Kathleen, go ahead. You're muted. Unmute your microphone.
Yes, I'm entering this sides conversation a little bit, but what I think is important is what you were saying. There's always ways to frame something as a basic human right. And I think what you said early on, let's not take sides. It's really important to try to find ways to say things without taking sides. And the other thing I want to say is it's really important to practice this, because we don't, I mean, there's sort of it's like you don't talk about sex and politics or something, I don't know, at dinner tables, whatever it is. It's like we don't get enough ordinary daily practice with forming these arguments or attitudes. And so I was suggesting, I wrote in the chat a little bit, okay, there's meta, a lot of people say no to that. There's different blogs, there are conversations in your church and conversations in other non-work related places where you can get this daily practice. And I noticed in myself, it always takes a little extra energy to get me to open my mouth. You know, it's like you have to push yourself a little bit. But once you start doing it more frequently, it's easier to do it. That's all. Just, you know, practice makes perfect. Practice is really important. Like if you're learning an instrument, we're learning a new instrument as spiritual beings to speak politically. And that's what we need to practice. That's what I want to say.
I am so glad you said that, because that is a great segue to something. So we were talking about Upaya Zen Center a while back. So on July 12th, I am facilitating an online conference on this very topic with several very powerful spiritual teachers. You're all going to get an email about it when we're done with this. And one of them is Mary Montgomery, who is the head of the chaplaincy program at Upaya Zen Center. And she is going to be talking about the Buddhist concept of right speech. And if you know anything about Buddhism, they have their 4 pillars of Buddhism, and that leads into the Eightfold Path. And the Eightfold Path has these 8 different things that you do in the right way. There's right livelihood, right, I can't remember. There's 8 right things. And one of them is right speech. And she talks about exactly what you're saying, Kathleen, is how do you speak in a nonviolent way? Some of you are psychologists and counselors. You've probably studied Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication. Chaplains, you've probably studied this too. This is where we learn some really basic things like reflective. If somebody says to you, I'm really angry at my mother and I'm so angry and I don't know what to do. And you respond by saying, I hear you saying that you're really angry at your mother and you don't know what to do. You repeat it back to them. There's all these tools for reflective, nonviolent communication. Right speech is sort of like that. It's how to be in the world and engage with conflict without creating more conflict. And so in our conference next month, she's going to be teaching us this from this very ancient Buddhist perspective on how to do exactly that, Kathleen. So I hope you will all attend the conference. You'll get a link to that. So thank you so much for talking about that. And we have some other teachers in that conference that are coming at it from different perspectives. We have a woman named Dr. Vanessa Brooks, who's going to be talking about it from the Black experience in America, you know, from the perspective of voices that have always been shut down and how dangerous it feels for Black people now to speak out and have always been, and what that's like for them. We also have a South American spiritual teacher talking about how do we use rituals. Karen, you were talking about, you know, community and worldwide grief rituals. So he's talking, it's going to be great. I hope you guys will all come. So thank you for giving me a boost to talk about that.
What's the date of it again? Would you tell us?
It's July 12th. It's a Saturday.
Okay.
So it's like 3 weeks from now, and you'll all get a link to that. And it's these are teachers that you've probably never heard of. They're not like big famous ones that we usually used to have at the Afterlife conference, but they're kind of, and there's also CE credits, 4 CE credit hours for social workers, nurses, psychologists, people who need. In fact, you know what? I'll put the link in the chat box here right now. As a matter of fact, while I'm thinking of it, hang on.
And so like this, it's an online format, and then people can attend live, or we'll get recordings if there's anything they have to miss, if they can't be there for all the presentations.
Yep, it's exactly like this. It's this exact same format. And here's the link. I'm putting it in here. And 4 CE credit hours. And you have to be there in person to get the CE credit hours. You can't get CEs for watching the recordings, unfortunately. And there's 5 presentations, and Brian Smith will be there. So those of you who are Brian Smith fans who missed him today, you'll get to see him there. And 4 of the 5 presentations are CE qualified. So you just have to be present live for those 4. The only one that isn't CE qualified is Brian's. So you can watch that one. So yeah. So please come and join us for that. All right, good. Let's see what else is in my notes to talk about with this. So thank you guys so much for being interested in this. Yeah, so another really big part of this, you know, I want to kind of just go over this, like all these rights that are being infringed upon. I want to throw this out there just in case anyone wants to say anything about it. So we're looking at due process, which means, you know, the right to not be arrested and incarcerated without a trial. Free speech, the right to say and publish whatever you want without being detained at an airport for what you have on your phone. There was recently a situation where a guy was coming here from Australia, just a regular guy. I don't know what his job was or anything. He was just a dude. And they stopped him at the airport and asked to look at his phone. They asked him for his password to open his phone, and he said no. And they said, okay, but if you don't let us look at your phone, we're going to put you on a plane and send you back to Australia. And so we had to give them his phone. They kept him in a detainment room for 3 hours while they looked through all his texts and all his social media to see if he had said anything against the government. And I guess they determined he was okay and they let him go. But this doesn't happen in America. When we were kids in the 1950s, they told us this is what communists do. So that's free speech, free thought, freedom of the press, as you guys know. Many reporters in what is they call the liberal media have been fired. They've gone to alternative internet media now. The White House press room has kept, again, so-called liberal media out of their press conferences. Freedom of education, you know what's going on with Harvard. The government's trying to tell them who they can admit as a student and what kind of curriculum they can have. Freedom of religion is a really, really big one for me. And so in terms of, you know, what you're putting on your blogs and your social media and what you're talking about, because I am a trained theologian, this is a big deal for me. What's going on in the public schools, some public schools, Oklahoma is a pretty big center of this, where they are passing legislation to force prayer in schools and Bible reading in schools. I have nothing against the Bible. If it's taught as literature, but certainly not forced to be taught from a faith-based perspective. So these are the issues that we should be thinking about. Again, they all attack human dignity and freedom of thought. So that's why I am listing them. Any thoughts on that?
One person wrote, my side is the side of love. And you can never, I don't think you can ever go wrong about expressing that on your protest sign. I'm, I'm for love. I'm on the side of love. And someone else emphasized the importance of not having a superior attitude to other people. And I was just going to mention there's a difference between righteousness and self-righteousness. Self-righteousness comes from the ego, which desires to show everyone, look how good I am. I'm better than you because I have better spiritual values than you do. But righteousness is standing up for the moral good and what's morally right. And so I think that's a good one to remember. Check your own ego if it's if it's getting involved in trying to present yourself as better than other people or superior to other people. Just that you are passionate about what you care about and believe in, and we don't need to make those judgments about who's better or worse.
And that is something that happens in spiritual circles a lot. There's a book that came out in the 70s. I just put it in the chat. It's called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism by a Buddhist Rinpoche. I don't know how to pronounce this. Choyam Trungpa Rinpoche. You can find it on Amazon. I read it in the 70s when it was new. Highly recommended. And he identified this trend called spiritual materialism, which is what you just described, Karen, in the 70s when everybody was into, transcendental meditation and living on spiritual communes and meditating and taking psychedelics and all of this and traveling to India and having gurus and living in ashrams and all of that. And people were getting very materialistic about it, kind of showing off like, I'm more spiritual than you are, and being very possessive about their vegetarian diets and whatever they were into. We still have that now. That hasn't changed much. And his book is amazing. I mean, he talked about, he himself, he was a Buddhist monk from Tibet, and he came to live in America, and he ate meat, he drank alcohol, he had sex with women, he did all the things you would not expect him to do. And that was kind of his position. He was, he wasn't a very holy guy in that sense that you would define that, and that was kind of his work in the world. So that's a really helpful book to look at that way. We can all get wrapped up in our egos about this stuff. Yeah, better angels is a very good term, and it comes from the civil rights movement, doesn't it? Or it came from the Civil War, I think, didn't it, Kathleen? You're muted. Kathleen, your microphone is muted.
Better angels comes from one of those aspirations. It's like a lot of us can't really always operate through our better angels, but we can aspire as a group. I think we can aspire. So it gives people a chance to kind of move in towards their moral values in an argument, which is really different often than the facts or the issues in the argument. It's like we have another self, let's step away. Let's look from our better angels or from our moral center about human dignity, for instance, as you brought up several times, which is really important, I think.
Yeah, I think the actual term better angels comes from somebody in the Civil War.
Okay, I'll look it up.
Right back, yeah.
Yeah.
Brittany, go ahead.
Well, I want to thank you both, Dr. Carrie and Dr. Karen. Thank you for this. It's just wonderful. What I wanted to just share is that don't give up, because the thing is I get this image because, again, I'm not living in the South, deep South, but I lived and worked for about 20, 30 years in the deep South. And I know how embedded they are in so many of their traditions from the Great Civil War. But I got this feeling of like that we're just the beginnings of like an underground railroad. We're talking about that. And then we've got Anne Frank and her family in the back bedroom. So the deal is we've got all these we're walking on pins and needles and cushions and stuff. And because, again, with this day and age with the internet, there's people that just live to react negatively to something positive. And that's why I feel like that's where, again, if we just don't give up and try to get our messaging correct, because the thing is there's will always be some kind of reaction. But again, that's what I think this is the stage you're at, and that we can move forward to have when we have better, identity about it, and that we won't get, stomped to the ground about it or get fired of those things. That this is a real movement, and I just feel very fortunate to hear such articulate people talking today, and again that I know we can ultimately overcome this, but it's just like what's been going on here. There's just too many people that get just stomped to the ground right away on the internet, and then they're afraid, or they get fired, or everything. Or just picketed, or their houses are set on fire. There's so much, or killed. They get murdered. Like those. The liberals. So that's where I feel like we're at. We're at such a massive turning point, and uh, I just, again, it's just, that's what I tell myself, is to stay involved, but try to find out how I can continue without worrying about, am I going to, get somebody really riled up where they respond in a very harsh manner, or, try much more violence, that sort of thing. So I just want to share that with you. But again, thank you so much.
I like what you said about, getting the messaging right, and also what Kelly's saying about looking through the creator's eyes. And it keeps bringing me back to, Mary Montgomery from Upaya and her thing about right speech. So I hope you guys will all come to this online conference next month. And I can't wait to hear her talk. And it's weird how I found her, because when I was putting that conference together, these are all different people than I usually have at my conferences. It was like, I said, oh, I'm going to have this conference. Who in the world am I going to get as a speaker? This is all new to me. And I found I wanted to have someone talk about right speech, because I know what it is. And I went to Upaya, and I went to the other Zen school, the one in Colorado. And I went on their Facebook page and I said, do you have anybody who would come and talk to my conference? And that's how I found her. And we had a long phone conversation, and I was just in awe, just sitting at her feet, listening to her, thinking, I can't believe I found this person, and she's going to speak at my conference. So she's going to be amazing. And boy, the Dalai Lama, yes, my goodness, just, there's a teacher, there's somebody to follow. And, this is a guy who came out, speaking to some, about AIDS and every other thing that's ever happened. And he could very easily hide out in a cave in Tibet if he wanted, but he knows what his job is. His job is to go out in the world and represent peace. And, and that's our job too. I mean, we're healers. We're channeling God's love, however you want to call that, whatever language you want to use, through our work as doctors, therapists, chaplains, whatever we are, hospice workers. And in that stuff that we're channeling, we do not beat people up. We do not round up people just because they're brown skinned. And we don't assume that they are criminals just because they may have come here illegally 20 years ago, but they've been mowing our lawns and babysitting our children and bussing our dishes, having 2 jobs for the last 20 years. We count that, And by the way, you never hear this on their news. I have a very, very dear friend who is from Mexico, who her work visa expired a couple years ago. When you have a work visa, to renew it, you have to go back to your home country to renew it. And a lot of people who have minimum wage jobs like she does, her job is she cleans the parking lot of the shopping center in my town. That's how I met her, because I walk through there at 6:00 in the morning on my walk, and I see her sweeping the parking lot with big broom. That's her job. That's one of her jobs. When she's done with that job in the morning, she goes and she works at the hospital as a janitor. And when she's done with that job, she goes to another job where she cleans a factory. She has these 3 jobs. She's your typical Latina immigrant worker. She fits that profile. She never went back to Mexico when her visa expired because she can't afford it, and she can't take time off from her jobs to go back to Mexico to renew. So she never went back. So technically, she's here illegally. Do you know that when people come here and they get a work visa, they get a social security number? Did you know that? They have social security numbers. And that's so even though the visa expires, the social security number stays forever. So a worker who comes here and gets a work permit, which only lasts for 6 months, they get a social security number with it that stays forever. They can buy a house. They can get a car loan. My friend from the parking lot has a brand new car that she bought. They can get on Medicaid if they need it, and they do because they work 3 jobs and they still can't afford health insurance. And because they're part-time with these 3 jobs, they don't qualify for job insurance. So yes, they can get these benefits because they have health insurance, but they work harder than any of us and they deserve it. And so with these massive assumptions about these illegal workers, which are all inaccurate, there's this assumption that they're leeching off the system and not giving anything back. And by the way, because they have social security numbers, guess what? They pay taxes. Duh, from their 3 jobs. So everybody misunderstands this system and looks at my friend cleaning the parking lot, who, by the way, I have not seen in quite a while. And I'm afraid that she's probably gotten scooped up and sent back. I don't know where she is. So anyway, so that's the story. So the next time you see someone like her sweeping the parking lot, go say hello. Because they probably have 3 jobs and make minimum wage. Sorry, just went on a rant because I really love this person. All right, let's see what else we got. See, I knew better angels came from the Civil War. And look at a beautiful thing it came from. For unity and resolution of the impending conflict by calling for better angels of our nature. Ah, beautiful. Okay, any other thoughts?
Terry, I wanted to say something maybe about, well, I hate using this term self-care, so I think it gets overused, but all of us, we're all expressing our own distress and anxiety, the pain that we're feeling and the grief that we're feeling. And so I think this is a really important time that we do remember we have to keep ourselves grounded. And so we've got to pay attention to whatever our practices are that help ourselves. We have to stay in balance and find a place of equanimity. So whatever it might be, deep breathing, meditation, yoga, somatic body therapies, walking out in nature, connecting with nature. We really have to, I think, double down on those things for ourselves right now, because we can't serve anything or make it better if we fly off and fall apart. So we need to keep ourselves together, and every step we take is sacred right now. Every word we say, every step we take, every action we do. So be kind to yourself, love yourself, so that you can keep going another step and take the next step. And we can all stay here together. And remember that we're all holding this enormous space together for humanity. Like, there are so many more of us than we even know who are out there energetically putting out their love and concern and their care, and who are grieving with us. And so there's a big network that came together today, and it's so much bigger than we even know. So don't forget that we're all connected and none of us are alone, even when we're in communities where we can't find someone who thinks like we do.
Yeah.
That's a perfect thing to wrap up with, Karen. Thank you. And I think you said right action. That's one of the Buddhist Eightfold Path things. Right. Look that up when you guys have a minute. It's called the Eightfold Path. And right action is one of them. Right livelihood, which I think so many of us are so blessed to have, that we're working in this work that we've strived so much to get into doing this work that means so much to us. Yeah, self-care. Just go take a walk.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes just going outside and breathing the air. Get a dog. They force you to take walks. That's how they take care of us. All right. Well, you guys have been amazing. And thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Terry. It's been a pleasure to be together with you again.
Yeah, we haven't seen each other in a while.
Oh, I know.
And thank you to all of you who came. And you're going to be getting an email from either Karen or me. We haven't figured out who's going to send that email. And we'll send you a link to the recording within a couple hours, I guess. And so check your email. And I hope to see you at the conference next month. And we will stay in touch. Thank you for your beautiful work, all of you.
Yeah, thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.